Hi, boys and girls. We're getting ready to start session 14, and this is investigating symbols. So I would just like for you to take a second and think about what are some of the words that you think of when you hear the word fantasy. I know something I think of is dragons, unicorns, castles, wands, wizards, fairies, dark forest. Those are some of the things I think of whenever I think of a fantasy book. And most of these words we think of when we hear fantasy are objects or characters or settings. Oftentimes, these objects, characters, or settings can be interpreted as symbols. So here comes the great big post-it note of everything. Today I want to teach you that fantasy readers keep an eye out for repeated or highlighted images, objects, characters, or settings. When fantasy readers see these things, they pause and ask themselves, could this be a symbol of something else? And how does this symbol connect to a possible theme? So certain elements go from story to story, and symbols being one of those things. Symbols can mean almost the exact same thing in two completely different stories. For example, looking back at these things that I thought of when I think of fantasy, I was thinking that the dark forest, a lot of times that represents the unknown. Or a unicorn usually symbolizes goodness or innocence. And a castle usually symbolizes power. Could be good, could be bad. You don't only find symbolism in literature, you can also find it in pieces of artwork. So here's an example. This is St. George slays the dragon. So if you look, you've got your knight here. So he symbolizes all that is good. You have your white horse. You have your maiden who is fearful and frightened and needs the man to protect her. And you have this dragon that's being slain by this knight. You have these people watching. You have this castle, which represents all of this power. Okay? So let's look at an anchor chart. This would be something that you would be gluing into your reader's notebook if we were together. But fantasy readers can use symbols as a way to interpret themes. While reading, be prepared to find symbols. Symbols might be images, objects, characters, or setting. They are repeatedly mentioned or highlighted. Consider what each symbol might represent or mean, like the crown, royalty, or power. And lay those symbols and their meaning side by side and consider how they might fit together. Number 4, while pondering the relationship between the symbols, think about possible themes. So here we've got power and strength and danger. Power can be used for good, ... Let's look at this next picture. And we're going to try to keep these things in mind. This is called the Maiden and the Unicorn. So remember what we talked about with the Maiden and the unicorn especially representing innocence. So she's a completely different person than the person that was in the last piece of art that I showed you. She's not wearing a crown, and the last lady was. She doesn't even have on shoes. Your move of using another text in this is when you compare this maiden to this maiden, you can tell that she's royalty. She's wearing a crown, whereas, like we said, she's not even wearing shoes. So chances are she's not royalty. Chances are she is probably a peasant. Okay. The same work we did on these paintings is the same work that you can do in your fantasy books. When you come across an object that's mentioned a lot or described in fine detail, you'll want to stop and take notice and ask yourself, could this be a symbol? What could it be a symbol for? And how does it fit with the rest of the story? So thinking about those three questions, let's look at the Thief of Always. And if we go back to the paper I would like for you to set up for today, at the top, you're going to write session 14. And you're going to think about what things are in your book. Now, granted, we did not have castles and fairies and things like that in the book we were just reading, but we did have fish. We also had, and I'm going to add this to it as I'm thinking about it right now, we also had a pond. And those things keep getting repeated. From Miss Griffin being we don't want to fish there at the beginning, to Lulu coming out of the pond and giving those items from the ark back to Harvey. And we know that this house has a reputation for trapping or keeping or holding. So that's some words I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of the pond. And with the fish, I'm thinking of them being a prisoner. Okay. So these fish kind of represent a prisoner, and this pond kind of represents them being trapped or kept or held, kind of like maybe a jail or something, because it's kind of like they don't care because they made it to that point. And you saw how Lulu just kind of dwindled off. But somehow this pond is holding on to them. So as you're reading and you're making your list of things that you keep seeing repeated, think about, what do they symbolize? How does it fit into what we think is one of the bigger themes in the text? And how does that theme give you more thinking about the pond and the fish? Okay, so as you're reading, what symbols do you see? What do they represent? You're going to make one of these charts. You're going to be able to use it Friday in your Writing Long and Strong, or your chart might look something like this. This is somebody's work, and they drew a picture of Gregor's sword. They said that it shows courage and evil. And then they also put the theme in here. I think the theme is humans are capable of evil and great goodness, because the sword can hurt someone, but it can sometimes lead to great good or goodness. Then we've got a cat, and they're telling why they think this, or is that a cat or a mouse? Could be a mouse, could be a cat. Okay, when I saw the long tail. So your notes can look like this, or your notes can look like this. It's entirely up to you. So make sure you fill out your status of the class and listen to the chapter today, and we will be finished with the story on Friday. Take care, boys and girls.